Well, good morning. How are you? It is great to see you today. I am so glad that you're here. Let me just say it out loud. We are 5 weeks away from Easter, and so that's happening, and I want to make sure that's in your head, in my head, that we are 5 weeks away, 5 Sundays. In 5 Sundays, it'll be Easter Sunday, and yes, Easter is on 4/20. Wink, wink. This, not that kind of high, this kind of high, okay? And I think that there's just something to that for us this year, right? So be watching for that. We're going to be talking a lot about that. There will be extra services at both of our campuses, and we'll be talking to you more about how to divide and be in and make sure we have room for everybody this year. And on that note, I want you to know that next weekend, I will start talking to you about how we're going to make sure that this is an amazing Easter, not for you, not for me, but for those who we live by and talk to and shop with and go to school with and on in the bleachers with at our kids' games and all of that. And so next weekend, I'll be talking to you about how we're going to get from where we are to that day, which will just be 4 weeks later after that. So we'll talk about that a little bit next week. All right. So we're going to talk for the next few weeks about a temptation that only is experienced by Christians. Now, while this temptation is what Christians wrestle with, or quite honestly should wrestle with, the tension that is associated with this temptation is something really that anyone can relate to, whether you're a Jesus follower or not. And so this series might make sense of maybe that internal disappointment that you feel or I feel sometimes, even though the truth is when we look around, we have most of what we need, but that internal disappointment that sometimes is just sort of this nagging, kind of maybe even constant nagging of what, let's just call it never enoughness, right? Like no matter what you do, what you have, where you go, it's like there's just something, it's just not enough. And these are emotions that are, honestly, they're common to everybody. But in terms of this specific temptation, there is a unique angle that is really only true for people who are attempting to follow Jesus. And it's actually one of the temptations that Jesus faced. And Matthew and Luke both tell us that Jesus was by himself. He was alone. He's going through a difficult time. He's physically worn out. And during that time, he is tempted personally by the evil one, by the devil. This is the third temptation, if you're familiar with that. It is the temptation also that many of us as Christians are tempted with, but I'm just telling you, it is so subtle. I think most of us don't even know when this temptation is actually happening. And here's what Luke tells us about this, that the devil led him up to a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the world. And so Matthew says, all the kings of the world, Matthew says in their splendor. Maybe they're up on a mountain and they're looking out at the city of Jerusalem and it's lit up at night and it just kind of represented the kingdoms of the world. Or maybe it was something beyond that. We don't really know, but they're looking at something. And the tempter says to Jesus, look at it. I mean, take it in. I was trying to think about something that maybe we could relate to, that we could understand maybe what was going on there. And I'm telling you, all of my illustrations I could come up fell way, way short, but let me take a shot anyway. Maybe you have done a tour of homes. Maybe for whatever reason you were doing a tour of homes. Maybe you were buying one, or maybe you were just on one of these. Hey, we're going to go out in the community. We're going to go to this tour of homes. And isn't it true when you do that, they got all the cool kitchen stuff, and the refrigerator will talk to you, and the washer and dryer, you can start and stop it from the Bahamas, right? All the windows and the shades move, and that's just the first house. And then you go to the next one, and it's just like really, it's not so much a tour of homes anymore. Now it's like a tour of discontentment is what it feels like. Because when you get home, you walk in and you're like, did someone lower the ceilings while we were gone? It's like, wow, what? I just feel like I have to kind of walk around my house like this, and my dishwasher's making a noise, and that window won't open, it's stuck, and I don't have a remote that works. And so when we're in those environments, it's just so much to take in. It's like, wow, did you see that? That was awesome. And this was that I'm in now is like, wah, wah. It's like, well, it's just this. It's just my house. And this is kind of that moment. It's like, Jesus, the evil one's saying, I know why you're here. I know why you're here. You're here for them, and I can give them to you. And here's what Matthew tells us, and I love this because Matthew actually knew Jesus and got this from Jesus. And here's what Matthew tells us, that the evil one says that I will give you all their authority and splendor. You get to be the king of all the kings, all the glamour, all the awesomeness, all the wowness of all of this, because that's all been given to me, and I can give it to anybody I want to. Now, if that's all we knew, if that was the end of the story, I mean, come on, who would say no to that, right? Oh, I can get all that? Sure. And before maybe you start faking some humility right now and go, oh, well, I don't really care about all that kind of stuff. I mean, stuff doesn't really matter to me. I mean, come on, really? Do you turn down a promotion at work? No. Do you turn down raises? Oh, no, I'm not really into money. No, you take the raise, don't you? Do you turn down bonuses because you're just so humble? No, of course you take the bonuses and the promotions. And I mean, do you avoid good opportunities or maybe better opportunities when they come along? No, and you shouldn't, right? I mean, this just feels like Jesus has this opportunity to get what he actually came for. In fact, this whole story so far, it really doesn't even seem like a temptation, does it? It really feels like maybe the opportunity of a lifetime, right? I mean, what's being offered is the goal. It's what he was after. It's what he came for. It's why we want to succeed. That's what we're wired to do. It's why you get up and get dressed. And this is why you discipline yourself. Not because you're evil, but because we are wired for progress and activity and creativity. We are created in the image of God, and God looks at chaos and brings order out of chaos. And what do? We walk into a room and an environment, and we bring order to that, whether it be your home or whether it be your business. We are all made to achieve, and all of that's good. But as you know, in the encounter of Jesus, or maybe you've heard, there's a trade-off. And this is where this becomes more temptation than maybe opportunity. The tempter says, all of this I will give you. Let's make a trade. All you got to do is bow down and acknowledge me as your authority. Just worship me. And let me just say, all you got to do is acknowledge that I'm the source of all these good things. Just once, just for a moment, just acknowledge me for a split second as your king. I mean, think about it. This is true for all of us. We're not tempted to succeed. We're not tempted to achieve. We're supposed to. So the whole thing is honestly a little bit strange. And so the tempter says, hey, all of this, I'll give it to you. All you got to do is acknowledge me as the source of all things and acknowledge me as your king, and boom, you can have it all. And you know what happens next? Here's what Jesus said. Away from me. Get away from me. I don't want what you're offering. You're offering the opportunity to rule like every other ruler, the opportunity to be king like every other king. You're offering kingdoms like every other kingdom, and that's not what I came for. In fact, you can't give me what I came for, and that's important because the world has never seen what I came for. So away from me. And then Jesus quotes the Old Testament. He says, it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. I'm not here, he's saying, to acquire. I'm not here to improve. I'm not here to recreate some of what already exists. Here's what he's saying. That's not my kind of kingdom. Because I'm not the kind of king where people with all the gold get to determine the rules, where it's all about image management, win, lose, top down. There are good guys, there are bad guys, and if you're a good guy, then you need to destroy and get rid of all the bad guys. I'm familiar with those kind of kingdoms, but I'm not interested. Jesus is saying, I'm not interested in the all for one and I'm the one approach to anything. It's not why I've come. Now, this is a bit confusing because what is the alternative to achievement? If that's what's being offered and somehow that's a bad thing, do we just all of a sudden stop caring, don't compete, don't accomplish, C's, get degrees, just roll over? I mean, here's the thing. If all there is to this life is what we can see, if all there is to this life is this life, then it is in fact a win-lose world. And there is no advantage to losing if that's our only option. When we're only left with one good option, you know what we have to do? We have to strive to survive. When that's our only option, we have to strive, because in a win-lose world, and like it or not, there are winners and losers, and some people can compete better than other people, and you just got to claw your way to the top and try to stay there and then go to church on Sunday and sing some songs and ask God to help you stay there or get there. I mean, what other option is there if it's a win-lose world? Is there another option? Look, I'll be straight up with you. I am a natural-born striver. It's in my DNA. My dad was a striver, and that's not a criticism of him or me. It's just in me. It's in so many of you, right? For some of you, it's been a matter of survival. And so, look, I'm not being critical. But is that the only option? Well, here's the good news. There's another option. And we say this a lot here. There's not only another way, honestly, there's a better way. And you know what the better way is? It is the Jesus way. And he modeled for us the way. And it is a way that I'm telling you, I am tempted to quit on or ignore every single day of my life. Oftentimes multiple times a day, because not only does the Jesus way push against culture and everyone and pretty much everything around me, the Jesus way also goes completely against my selfish nature, the all about me part. I mean, and there's a better way. The way of Jesus is better. Following Jesus will make you better at life. It will make you a better man. It will make you a better woman, a better spouse, employer, employee, a better neighbor, because he offers a completely different way of living that is completely different direction, but it is so subtle and it is so not natural for us. It is so against the flow that it's easy to think that we're in the stream going with Jesus, when in fact we're in the stream with culture. Except we wear a cross and we know the songs and we pray that God will help us compete and win against everybody else that we're competing against and trying to win against. The way of Jesus, the Jesus way, is better for you, and it's better, quite honestly, for all the yous that are around you. And here's the thing. Following Jesus will not make you less productive. It will make you better productive. Following Jesus will not make you less ambitious. In fact, you can't even help that. For those of you who are just super, super ambitious, you are hardwired to be ambitious. You can't shut that down. That is in some ways the image of God in you, and the Jesus way won't make you less ambitious. Do you know what it will do? It will make you appropriately ambitious. It won't make you less successful, but it will change your definition of success. So, for a few weeks, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to learn to identify when we are being tempted to abandon the Jesus way. And to get us started, Jesus' response to the tempter is actually helpful to us for where we're going. Remember, here's what he said when he was tempted. No. I don't want the kingdoms of the world. I don't want what you have to offer. I've not come to replicate something. I've come to introduce something brand new. And he says this, worship the Lord, your God, and serve him only. And now he lifted this from the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is where Moses is giving the nation of Israel some marching orders as they're finally about to enter into their new homeland. We refer to that as the Promised Land. And he's saying, look, when you get there, you're going to prosper there. But don't forget where you came from. Don't forget your roots. Don't forget that once upon a time you were slaves. Don't forget where you came from, and don't forget who put you there. And here's the full text Jesus is referring to. Moses said this to people. He said, be careful that you do not forget the Lord, who is the one who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. He's saying, you didn't do this. You were a slave. And then there's this statement that Jesus lifts out of the Old Testament. And here's what he says. He says, fear the Lord your God and serve him only. Don't forget whose and who you are, all that God has done for you. Do not adopt the ways of the nations you are going to be surrounded with. Now, here's something that's so interesting, but I'm telling you, it's so confusing sometimes when you read the Bible. Because in the Old Testament, especially, people who are reading the Old Testament are like, I don't understand God in the Old Testament. It's so important to know this. In the Old Testament, especially leading up to this moment where Moses and the people he's sending the people into the Promised Land, God had out-Pharaoh'd Pharaoh. I mean, many of you may know the story of all the plagues and all the stuff where God out-Pharaoh'd Pharaoh. And what happened is God dipped into the kingdoms of this world, meaning he humiliated Pharaoh's gods, he destroyed Pharaoh's army. God literally dipped in and played by the rules of the kingdoms of this world for a reason. He did it to set the stage for the coming kingdom that was going to be nothing like this world. A kingdom launched by his son, Jesus, the Messiah, the anointed one, as king. And now Jesus is on earth and he's unfolding what God had been planning all along, a different kind of living with a different set of values. A way that sets people up for a different kind of relationship and a different kind of experience with God. And in Jesus' final temptation, he's actually being tempted or invited to, and this is interesting, he's just being invited to repeat history. He's saying, just dip into the kingdoms of this world. Jesus, just take on the kingdoms of this world like you did with Pharaoh, and let's just keep this thing going. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it's always going to be. The evil one is tempting as he goes along. He says, you can't change that. It's always going to be this way, and I'll just give it all to you if you'll just take it. And so what he was tempted is he was tempted like we are to embrace old ways. The expected way, which is a win-lose way. But Jesus had come to launch a brand new way, an upside down way. In fact, the Apostle Paul calls it the way of the cross. And today we're calling that the Jesus way. And so Jesus refused the offer, but here's the problem with the way of the cross, the Jesus way, especially in the first century. Nobody had ever done it this way before. This was brand new. In fact, it was untested, it was risky, and even his closest followers who followed Jesus for 3.5 years, they saw this lived out, this new way lived out, and at the very end, they too are tempted to opt out of the kingdom way, to opt out of the Jesus way, and to opt back into the win-lose way of thinking of the kingdoms of the world. I mean, when Jesus was arrested, they hoped for another Red Sea moment where Jesus was going to rip off his rabbi's robe, declare himself king, and defeat the Romans and reestablish Jerusalem, because that's all they knew is win-lose. It was the only model they had ever had. And again, of course, they tried to force Jesus into what already existed, but Jesus came to do something new. Entirely different, to establish a different way of thinking and living. And so when Jesus was arrested, they were being tempted just as he was, and they viewed his arrest through the whole lens of win or lose. And Jesus was clearly losing. And so they ran. Because who would choose to follow a loser? Who would choose to lose? And then 3 days later, they're back. Because suddenly they realize, wait a minute, he wasn't kidding. He really is a king. He really is doing something different, something new. We saw the whole thing and we missed it and we ran. We blinked at the last moment. But oh my goodness, now we understand. And these same men and women went on to take the way of the cross, the Jesus way, the message of Jesus into the world. And did you know their re-engagement is why we're here today? And that's why the symbol of our faith is not a sword. It's not a trophy. It's not a checkered flag like we won something. It's not an army eating sea. The Jesus way is a cross. And no one understood this better in the first century than the Apostle Paul. The reason he understood it better is because he lived on both sides of that equation. He was an expert and fully devoted to the religious system that was built around the kingdoms of the world thinking, the win-lose thinking, progress justifies violence thinking, that the end justifies the means. It's always been that way. It's always going to be that way. There are good people, there are bad people, and Paul would say, I'm part of the good people, and we have to get rid of the bad people. But Paul understood better than we do where that approach to life and get it to religion and to culture of the day would lead. And do you know why he understood it? Because, get this, this is amazing. Paul became the leader on both sides. I mean, do you know the story? When Christianity began gaining traction in the first century, they called it the way. And get this, the way was considered a parasite. And it had latched on to Judaism, and it was sucking the life out of Judaism. It was an infection, and it needed to be eliminated. And Paul volunteered to eliminate it. And so he's operating under the old way, the kingdoms of this world way, and he felt justified to track down and arrest and execute traitor Jews, not Joes, Jews. He felt justified holding back no amount of cruelty. His cruelty, get this, his cruelty was the way of God in his thinking. Like, this is God's will for me to do this. He was doing God's work, God's way. No issues of conscience whatsoever. And get this, he weaponized and he politicized his religion with a clear conscience. But when Paul became a follower of Jesus, he could find nothing in Jesus' teaching to justify violence to those who violently opposed him. He laid it down. He let go of the kingdoms of the world way, a way that appears at times to be the only way forward, the only way that ever gets anything done, the way that actually works. And Paul instead took up the Jesus way, the way of the cross. In fact, this is what he talks about all through his writings. Listen to how he explained it to a group of people that are so much like us. Because they were a church. They're so similar to us. They were a church. And they were educated. And they were thoughtful. And they were into culture. People who were winning. They were into achievement. They lived in a metropolitan area. And they were sophisticated people. It was a sophisticated city. It was the city of Corinth. And here's what he wrote to the people in Corinth. He said, the king sent me, which is so important because I put in king because our English version says that Christ sent me. But here's what's so confusing. Isn't it true that Christ has just become Jesus' last name? But that's not. He's saying he's a king. He's the Christ. He's the Messiah. And Paul writes, the Christ, the King, sent me to preach the good news, but not with wisdom and eloquence. And he has this to say. He's like, hey, look, I know how all the orators, the speakers of your day explain things, and I'm not doing that. I know that there are culturally correct words and ways to be, and the reason I'm not going to do that way is I don't want the presentation to get in the way of what's being presented. And I'm presenting what is good news for all people, everywhere. And look what he says. He's like, not with wisdom and eloquence, lest the cross of Christ, there it is again, the King, and look, there is no category, you got to know, there's no category for what he just said there, the cross of Christ, the King. There is no category for those words in the first, second, or third century. The cross of Christ, the cross of my King, he said, lest it be emptied of its power. And it's like, wait, Paul, wait, your King died on a cross? Are you telling us the Romans killed your king and you want us to worship your loser king? You're going to have to explain that. And what do you mean by the cross would be emptied of its power? Crosses don't have power. Crosses are symbols of powerlessness. Crosses don't have power. If you have a cross, it's like it's over. You've been defeated. You're at the bottom of the pile. It's oblivion. It's as if you've never even happened. It's everything in life you want to avoid. You don't want a cross. And let me just tell you, this glaring contradiction actually points to and it highlights for us the upside downness of the Jesus way that you and I are tempted daily to avoid. Because it is so unnatural, it is rarely modeled. You almost never see the Jesus way, and when you see it, you stop and stare because it's just so unusual and it's powerful. And you and I, as his followers, are tempted to avoid and abandon it every day because here's the problem. We tend to think, well, that won't work. But it did. And it's why we're here. The way of the cross. This symbol of suffering and shame, as the old hymn says, is the symbol of your faith and mine. Why? Because it describes better than anything else from ancient times the otherness, the backwardness, the oppositeness of the message and the Jesus way. A way of living, I'm telling you, that's going to always feel risky and it's never going to feel natural. And that's why we're tempted to abandon it and avoid it every single day. Maybe this is why Jesus said, whoever wants to be my disciple, my follower, must deny themselves and take up their cross daily. Deny themselves. Say no to you. And take up your cross daily and follow me. And when he said this, they're like, wait, what? Jesus, you're a rabbi. And we don't mean to be disrespectful, but maybe you don't know how rabbiing works. Right? So sit down, Jesus. Let us just explain to you what rabbis actually do, because rabbis, they take the scriptures, our scriptures, the Torah, the scriptures we all agree with, and they explain it to us with new and creative and different ways so that we can apply it in our lives and our culture, because us first century people, we're modern people, right? So Jesus, are you listening? We don't want that old way, and so would you illustrate it and teach it and apply it and then re-explain it one more time like we're really like 5-year-olds and tell stories to us about it so we can get it, but come on, take up a cross and follow you? That sounds like you're going to move in the complete opposite, different direction. And Jesus said, yes. And you're going to have to deny yourself in order to do this. And he says, daily. And do you know why he said daily? It's because every day, I am tempted to choose the kingdoms of the world approach to everything. And every time something doesn't go my way, every time somebody disagrees with me, somebody hurts my feelings or says something bad about me, every single day, I want to win. I want to come out on top, and I want to come out on top looking good. And when he said this, This had nothing to do with dying for someone else's sins. God's not asking us to die for someone's sins. He's asking us, in fact, it's more than that, he's calling us to live a completely different direction. So I want to try to maybe set this down in our real world. And so here's what I want to do. I want to give you a little bit of a homework, some homework just to make this practical. I want to encourage you, but I think I want to take a step past encourage, and I'd like to challenge you. And the thing is look, if you're not a Jesus follower, I think you should play along with us on this because it won't hurt anything in your life. So just think about this, and I want to challenge you to take a question with you into this week. Now, here's what I need to say before that. I want to challenge you by giving you this question, but I don't want you to act on it. It's too early for that. Don't act on it. It's too risky. And honestly, I just don't want you to act on it yet. But it's important you have the question. I just want you to consider it. So this week, anytime that there's a disagreement or a conflict at home, I mean, it could be simple like, hey, I had that first. Well, I had it first. I mean, it could be simple. Well, hey, I got here first. No, you got here first. You know, whatever it is, I want you to, whether it's at home or getting back to school this week, wherever you are, I just want you to ask yourself silently in the point of that conflict tension, just ask yourself, what would choosing to lose look like in this situation? What would it look like if I just let the other person win? I mean, what would it look like if I just let them go first, even though I was here first? What would it look like if I just let them take credit, even though they totally don't deserve credit? What would it look like if I just deferred to them? What would it look like in this situation, the tension of this conflict, if I just chose to let them win? And think about this. There's a big difference between losing and choosing to lose. Because choosing to lose is not a sign of weakness. It requires strength. Some might say it requires supernatural strength, or as Paul would say, it requires power, supernatural, resurrection kind of power. And that's why when you see this happen, you stop and you stare because it's unusual and it's unnatural. And you got to sort this out in your own world. And you got to sort this out in your own family. And you got to sort this out in your own finances. And you got to sort this out in your job. And you got to sort this out in your situation. This in some way reflects and represents the way of the cross, which is the Jesus way. So, what would choosing to lose look like in that situation? A good place to start might be in the parking lot on your way out today. Another good place is on the road to wherever you're going from here to there. Or the restaurant you show up at for lunch when you got there first, but they got it first. And we'll pick it up right there for part 2 of the Jesus way. Father, thank you for teaching us a different way. The way of your cross, the Jesus way. Would you help us in these moments of conflict, when we feel the tension of conflict? And before we do anything about it, to just consider this week, what would it be like to just lose in this situation and to lose to this person? What would that be like? And thank you that we don't have to totally wonder, because when we look at what you did for us, that we are preparing to celebrate and remember that we have seen it modeled. And so would you help us as we decide to choose the Jesus way? And we ask it in his name. Amen.